The Democrat Party is facing an existential crisis, not because it lost the Oval Office and the House of Representatives in the recent election, but because it lost its way as the voice of the working class. Not so long ago, the only differences between a Republican and a Democrat was that a Democrat wanted the government to protect the job they have, and to ensure that the job they have today is the job they have tomorrow, and to provide a safety net for times of trouble and unemployment. That may be hard to believe after 20 years of expanding distance between the parties, but if you compare the party platforms of 1992, you will see that is not too far off the mark. During the last 20 years, the major parties have moved away from each other ideologically and civilly. Perhaps more saliently, party leadership has moved away from the people. As neoconservatism hijacked the Republican Party, the Democrat Party was overtaken by the New Left. These factions were and are well represented in the aristocracy and academia. But as party leadership drove the platforms further into the fringes of their respective ideologies, the average citizen has been left to contemplate the benefits of their party allegiance. In the race to the fringe, the Democrat Party left its core constituencies behind: the blue-collar middle class, the working poor, and the destitute. When globalism exploded during the 1990s, the Democrat elites could not be distinguished from the Republican elites, as they embraced a global economy that exposed an unprotected global labor force, and the heretofore unimagined profits that could be extracted from it. Millions of manufacturing jobs moved overseas, pulling the rug from under the Democrats' core constituency: blue-collar union workers. Since 2000, the Democrat agenda has been to remake American society in its own image. Incessant exhortations of inclusion promised a welcoming society for all. But that inclusion applies only to people who think and act like the Democrat elite, who use their surrogates in entertainment and news-like media to bully and demonize anyone who does not, which is the exact opposite of a free society for anyone following along. The Democrats were so focused on creating Democratopia that in 2016, presidential candidate Hillary Clinton told an audience that she would put coal companies out of business. She tried to temper that statement with promises of jobs in renewable energy, but the damage was done. The Democrats were driving party ideology over livelihoods, over the ability of constituents with limited occupational options for putting food on the table and the children through college, and trying for maybe a little extra for a reliable vehicle that did not leave them stranded on the way to work every other month. The Democrats' continuous mantra of "anyone but Trump, so pick us" since 2016 has dominated the airwaves and bitwaves, overwhelming any potential recognition of their barren political platform by the allegiant and curious alike, all the while seemingly unconscious of the long-term consequence of such an emotionally charged and intellectually vacuous strategy, if it could be called that. The Democrats' message is so weak that self-described communist and social democrat Bernie Sanders gave former Senator and Secretary of State Hillary Clinton a run for her money in the 2016 presidential primary season. Not to be deterred by lack of substance, Hillary simply invoked the Democrat Party's nuclear option of superdelegates and bounced Bernie from consideration. That leads to the 2024 so-called democratic process, where a person who was awarded 0 delegates during the primary season was ordained by the Democrat Party elite to succeed the democratically nominated Joe Biden as their candidate. This undemocratic process was eclipsed by a candidate who failed to elucidate a compelling vision and coherent platform for the post-Biden period. Whether this was a failure by the party to construct a cogent message, or a failure by the candidate to deliver the message remains an open question. But the historical evidence points to the former. The Democrat Party that was steamrolled by Ronald Reagan in 1980 and has been doing its best Weekend at Bernie's impression since Al Gore's presidential bid in 2000, has been revealed finally for the parasite-infested carcass that it is. With establishment stalwarts Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi aging out of their roles, what young leaders will emerge to redefine the Democrat Party for Generation Beta?
This is Philip A. Buster. My friends call me all the time. Jacobin Butters is a listener-supported operation. It is not owned by some giant corporation pushing an elitist agenda. There's no billionaire paying the bills and telling them what to say. Although, I might not complain if there was. Jacobin Brothers speaks for the people and is the people. Show your support by visiting jacobinbutters.com. Click the donate button and throw the boys some scratch. I'll be glad you did. jacobinbutters.com.
I am Mark Jacobin. My co-host is James Jacobin. We are the Jacobin Brothers, and this is Truth and Other Lies. James, when precisely did the Democrat Party lose the audience?
I would say it began in the mid-90s when President Bill Clinton and that iteration of the Democratic Party decided to join the Republican. Big corporate money, and I mean big corporate money. This is when they started moving away from the unions, although the unions didn't know it yet. The Clintons decided that they wanted their piece of the pie for those big donations, and so they started accepting the money from Main Street, and that's when they started moving away from Wall Street. I know it's cliche, you hear it all the time, but you asked the question, it started in the mid-90s.
I think you meant to say moved away from Main Street and went to Wall Street.
Even I have been corrupted by it.
I think that when you look at history, that Reagan defeat, although there may not have been a causal effect at that point in time, the path of history seems to believe that that's where the Democrat Party started to have its problems. Even though they still held Congress right up until 1992, for the most part. You had the migration to big money donors in the 90s. You had the Al Gore campaign in 2000. Al Gore was not the Democrat Ronald Reagan. He certainly wasn't any version of Bill Clinton. Al Gore was supposed to be Bill Clinton's third term, metaphorically, like Papa Bush's election was Ronald Reagan's third term. But he just couldn't seem to pull off the enthusiasm the way Bill Clinton did.
No, I mean, Al Gore's the type of person that, if you're talking to Al Gore, he was saying, well, that's a very fine point, Mark Jacobin, but I think I'm right because of this. Or you could explain to him the theory of relativity and he'd still have something to add to it. He's just that guy.
He's just that guy. It might have been the fact that he kept doing those town halls in his mom jeans, as they called them.
Yeah, how did we start talking about the 2000 election? Well, Mark, the Democratic Party realized something that was coming in the mid-90s, and that was big tech. The big tech was coming. Think about this. The biggest donor class they had in the mid-90s was their union donations. The Democratic Party was the blue-collar party since the days of FDR, since the days of the New Deal. You want to talk about a solid union voting bloc, it was the union. Tens upon millions of voters through different regions of the country. The Democratic bigwigs realized they wanted to keep up with the Republicans in that big corporate money, those big donations. And back then, the Republicans were being funded by big tobacco, big oil, big liquor, and the Democrats wanted in on the piece of the pie. And so they got it.
And then you fast forward to the Obama campaign in 2008. Obama taps into a newfound sector of fundraising, which is grassroots small money donations through social media.
He opted out of public funding, matching public funds for the presidential election. And he got most of his donations online in the amounts of $10 and $20 from average Joe regular people. But that was only really temporary, though. It's only temporary because you can only go to the people so long for money. Obama also opened up the entertainment donor class. Now, entertainment, as people call Hollywood, always has been a little more left with their politics and their donations. But Obama cozied up to the entertainment industry so closely that the donations came in record amounts from that area for two reasons. One, they loved Obama, just loved him. And two, during Obama's first term, I believe, is when Citizens United came down the pipe. And the Supreme Court said corporations are also people, and you could do unlimited money through super PACs. Well, there's a lot of wealth in Hollywood, Mark.
Yes, there is. So here you have evidence of cracks appearing in the Democrat base, especially with the unions. Now move ahead to the 2016 election. You have Hillary Clinton versus Donald Trump. By all traditional metrics, this should have been a slam dunk for Hillary Clinton.
Oh, there should have been no doubt. Even if it wasn't a slam dunk for Hillary Clinton, and I think this is where I was wrong when I predicted the 2016 election, where I had Hillary winning by just a few electoral votes, because I never in a million years thought that she'd forget to go to Wisconsin and Michigan, and that she could lose the upper Midwest states, which are completely driven by union votes, from steel workers in Pennsylvania to auto workers and textile workers. And that entire region is union. And it moved away from the Democrats and moved away from Hillary in 2016.
And it certainly didn't help that Hillary went to the Rust Belt and the Coal Belt and said, your jobs are going away and they're not coming back, get over it.
Yeah, that's an actual quote for all my Democrat and liberal friends who always get upset when I bring that up. Hillary said that, and she meant it. As candidate, Clinton meant that. Now, she may have been right from a common sense standpoint that the industry was dying, but you don't go mock and make fun to their face of that industry and then ask them for their vote.
But as a politician, and I can't believe I have to tell her this, Hillary, it's okay to lie.
Or even better, it's okay to provide leadership. It's okay to provide leadership. To go to your voting base and explain to them that times have changed. We have an automobile and not a horse. We have electricity and not candles.
But I think this is also symptomatic of the Democrat push for the Democrat ideals across the society, and not necessarily about providing good union jobs. Where are the good union jobs in the green energy sector? Can you point them out?
There isn't any. There's just billions and billions of dollars being lost in corruption to the so-called green sector, the Green New Deal, all this grants and billions of dollars of money being awarded to people to start green companies that just goes into the pockets of the people that fund the companies, found the companies, run the companies. Half these green companies don't get off the ground, they don't succeed, and they don't provide good jobs, and they didn't replace the union jobs, Mark, because at the same time the Democrats were screwing the unions by moving to Wall Street to get their money, they were also moving away from them culturally.
So let's fast forward from 2016 to 2024. We're now in the Harris-Trump era. Again, by traditional metrics, Harris should have had the advantage. She doesn't. Where did she go wrong?
Well, Kamala Harris, a lot of people want to equate the Harris and the Clinton campaigns, boil it down to one thing. Trump is Trump, and the other candidate was female, and there must be a sexism problem in the country if the female candidate can't beat Trump. Harris and Clinton, in most ways, to me, couldn't be more dissimilar, Mark. The only thing they have in common is they're Democrats and they're women. Clinton came out of the Clinton machine. This was the old school Democrats now. I'm getting old, that the Clintons came by in the 90s, but they ran the Democratic Party, it's fair to say, up until very recently when the Obamas took it over. Her job was to go in there, Clinton's job, and just toe the Democratic Party line. I feel your pain, unions, middle class, working class votes, liberal welfare programs, anti-war, and let's go home. And the Democrats have been running on that forever. Obviously, we talked about how Hillary Clinton screwed that up in 2016. By 2024, though, they weren't running on that anymore, especially on cultural issues. VP Harris and the Democrats can deny this all they want, but their own spokespeople, until their own people admitted it, is they lost the plot on cultural issues. They lost the plot on defund the police. They lost the plot on boys playing girls sports and many other cultural issues. And then went right back to their voting base and said, vote for these things which you do not want, which you do not understand. And if you don't, we're just going to call you names, but you better vote for us. And they assumed that their platform didn't need a candidate. When Nancy Pelosi and Barack Obama and George Clooney fired sitting President Biden from his re-election campaign, they were just hoping that Trump was so bad and that they had the majority of the voting bloc in the country, they could substitute any candidate. Because Hillary Clinton was actually a qualified, formidable candidate and probably would have been just as good a president as any two-party oligarch president we've had recently. Kamala Harris, not qualified to be president.
So they were just extending their mantra of Orange Man bad and hoping that would win the Oval Office.
Right. And we've covered this in prior episodes. That's why they never actually came out with an agenda or a plan, because they don't have one.
Let's take a break and come back with more. More what? It's dead, Jim.
Exactly. We don't even know it's dead.
Find your favorite Jacobin Brothers merchandise at shop.jacobinbrothers.com. T-shirts, hats, and beverage conveyances all branded with your favorite Jacobin Brothers logo. You'll be shocked by how much smarter you sound debating your friends while wearing official Jacobin Brothers apparel. Shop.jacobinbrothers.com. Democrats have controlled Congress for 56 of the last 90 years, compared to Republican control of Congress for 18 years. For 16 years, neither party held both houses. Democrats held Congress for 60% of that time period, compared to 20% for Republicans. Democrats were responsible for every major piece of social legislation in the 20th century, starting with Social Security in 1935. The minimum wage, the 40-hour work week, the GI Bill, the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act, OSHA, the EPA, the Federal Department of Education, government-backed student loans, women's participation in collegiate sports, and public assistance, aka welfare, are all products of Democrat control of Congress. The Democrats also gave us the Federal Reserve, the CIA, the Korean War, the Vietnam War, the Gulf War, the national speed limit, SUVs, and most recently, the unmitigated disaster that is the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare. James, most of these programs are now faltering under the Jupiter-sized weight of their unfunded liabilities, but many of them were welcomed at inception and effective for a number of years after they were created. Which ones were most helpful for improving the lives of individuals?
I'm going to start, Mark, right on the top with the Civil Rights Act, followed shortly thereafter by the Voting Rights Act, Title IX, which equalized funding for college athletics for men and women's sports, which was probably the greatest thing for female sports ever. Minimum wage. Moving down the list here, the 40-hour work week, the workman compensation program, another pretty good, pretty fair program that works out for the public sector, private sector, the employer, and the injured employee. OSHA, the EPA, the initial food stamps program. The ones that didn't work, the list, Mark, I could go on forever and ever and ever, but I'm just going to name two big ones that everyone's heard of. Social Security Act of the 1930s and the Department of Education. As Joe Biden likes to say, this is bipartisan. This is a bipartisan piece of legislation. It's pretty much generally accepted in a bipartisan way for voters that the Department of Education needs to be wholly reformed or scrapped.
Or scrapped. Every state has its own Department of Education. This isn't the 1930s where the majority of American states had the economies of third world countries and were largely farmland. Very few states had the economies and the structures that they have today. Right now, every state could be its own country, economically speaking, within the world. And that was exactly how the founders imagined it, that states were not administrative districts of the federal government, but they were their own states with their own laws and rules and cultures.
That's why they're called states and not provinces or territories, Mark. They're called states for a reason. You wouldn't have the big worry now that if states ran their own educations, deep southern states would teach race relations a certain way in their school books like they did in the deep south so many decades ago, because it's too hard to administer from the federal level. It's just brass tacks. It has nothing to do with ideology when I'm talking about this. Turn it back over to the states and give them some federal funding. Just the poorer states with the distribution of the textbooks.
I have a better idea. Stop stealing the money from the people and then extorting it back to the states. Let the people keep their money, and then they wouldn't need federal dollars.
And by the people, you mean the state.
Exactly.
Like anything, the federal government doesn't want to give it up. Mark, there's been plenty of conservative administrations and conservative Congresses since the turn of the century, 25 years ago. And we still have it. It still gets bigger. because it's such a huge apparatus. Just so much free money for the administrators, and it's so much political pull, and there's so many wedge issues involved. You could run it much better from the state level. At least that's what I think.
I agree. Getting back to the things they did right. We'll say it again. Civil Rights Act, Voting Rights Act, Title IX. These are probably the three most important pieces of legislation of the 20th century in terms of social advancement, followed closely by 40-hour work week, minimum wage, workman's comp. The next time you get overtime, thank a Democrat. The next time you're safe at work, thank a Democrat. The next time you're at work and you're not exposed to toxic chemicals because of the EPA, thank a Democrat.
I'm going to add to that. Don't thank the Democrats you know. Thank their great-grandparents.
Touche.
We're oversimplifying very complicated topics.
What we're trying to illustrate here, James, is that the Democrats had a lot of control during the 20th century, especially in the modern era, pre and post World War II, because they controlled the Congress. They had good ideas, and they were a force majeure throughout American history, culturally, politically. But since 1980, they have faltered, and their ability to drive the country the way they had and to be in touch with what the people wanted, because every one of these programs that we've listed, the people wanted when it happened. It's not like they were forcing legislation down people's throats.
Well, exactly. That's the difference now, Mark. The legislation and the stuff that the ideas put forth from the New Deal to some of these policies from the 60s that came out of LBJ and all that, they were good for all low-income people, not just union people or minority sector people. All low-income people, of all race, of all gender. And there were common sense things that were long overdue. There were things that probably you shouldn't have had to have legislation for. Like we had to have a Civil Rights Act because we weren't treating all the citizens equally. We had to have other things, like the workman's comp, because companies wouldn't do the right thing. For a limited amount of time, the American people said, okay, we'll let the federal government pass legislation that will compel free enterprise to do the right thing. It will compel people.
That free market that's supposed to be self-correcting was abusing its workers, and it forced the government to step in and protect them.
And that all men that are created equal thing wasn't really turning out that way, so the federal government stepped in. Now the federal government wants to step in with everything, so we can look back historically and say, okay, the federal government had to step in right there. But now the Democrats have no policies to run on, so they want to step in everywhere. They want to equate these very bizarre pseudo ideas to the civil rights movement or to all the good pieces of legislation and the improvements the Democratic Party of 50, 60, 70 years ago brought into American society. But the bank vault is empty, Mark. They have nothing to offer.
They tried to recover some of that former glory with the Affordable Care Act in 2009. The problem is that it was like a young movie director trying to create a blockbuster. He says, I'm going to create the best movie ever. And it falls on its face. Why? Because their goal was to set out to make the best movie ever, not to take care of the people. And that's what this was. This was billboard legislation. It never worked. It never had a chance of working. No one who has Obamacare actually likes Obamacare. They just accept it because that's the best option available to them. That was the last marquee legislation. That's the only marquee legislation we've gotten from the Democrats in the 21st century. And it was a complete failure.
That's not true, Mark. I keep hearing President Biden say over and over again he's passed the most legislation since FDR and LBJ, and that Build Back Better Act, the Inflation Reduction Act, the stupid Computer Chip Act. Mark, I got to tell you.
That may be true. He may have passed more legislation, but Is it?
You stole my thunder. You stole my thunder.
Oh, okay.
Well, they keep drilling him out there and telling him to say, we've passed more legislation, we've done this, we've done that. And I keep saying, this would be great if this was the 1960s and this stuff actually needed to be done. And that this legislation you passed isn't actually lining the pockets to the tunes of hundreds of millions of dollars in pork pails funding to everyone except the people it's meant to help. And this is why Joe Biden's so out of touch. This legislation will help no one, and it wasn't designed to. See, that's the difference between the Democratic Party now and way back when. Everything we're talking about here got signed before we were alive.
We'll be back with more. It's dead, Jim. Like this episode and subscribe to this channel to receive notifications of new episodes. Visit Jacobinbrothers.com to listen to the entire Jacobin Brothers catalog, including Truth and Other Lies, Extemporaneously, and Jacobin Reaction. The populist support for independent communist turned Democrat Bernie Sanders in 2016 sent shockwaves through the Democrat establishment. It was the first public and irrefutable evidence that the people were not happy with being left behind by Democrat leadership. If not for the Democrat Party's fear of actual democracy, Bernie would have been the Democrat nominee in 2016. The Bernie zeitgeist continued into 2018 when 29-year-old bartender Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez displaced entrenched incumbent Joe Crowley in New York's 14th district. Alexandria's progressive platform and endorsements by Bernie Sanders and Barack Obama seemed to signal an evolution of the Democrat Party. The aging New Left was being retired, and the youthful progressive left was on the march. To her credit, Alexandria has tried to advance her progressive agenda, sponsoring 47 bills in 6 years. However, the only bill advanced from committee and passed by the House was a retread that had been submitted by members in a previous term. Just last month, Alexandria lost a bid for ranking member of the House Oversight Committee to an establishment Democrat who is supported by the most powerful woman in America, Nancy Pelosi. James, the progressives believe themselves to be the future of the Democrat Party, but have not made any headway in Congress. Do they simply have to wait for the elder generation to pass the torch? Or have they been living too long in their own echo chamber, and the soul of the Democrat Party remains moderate?
Well, the Democratic Party is dead, as we know it. I don't know what they're waiting for. I said years ago that AOC and Bernie Sanders should start their own party. They didn't do that. They just decided to turn the moderate Main Street American Democratic Party that did all the things we talked about in the last segment and turn into the far-left progressive National Social Democrat Party. Good luck to them with that. No, Mark, they don't have to wait for the old moderate Democrats to die. The Democratic Party, as we know, it's already dead. They can have the party right now, and I wish them the best of luck with it.
Has the brand outlived its usefulness? Is the next legitimate contender to the Republican Party going to be called Democrats, or does it have to be reshaped into something else like Social Democrats, National Communists of America, something else?
If you listen to the Social Democrats online, the Bernie bros, some of them are heading in that direction, or some of them just want the Democrats to nominate the Social Democrats to go up against the populist Trump-era people. Because the moderate Democrats, well, the first roller isn't a moderate Democrat anymore, but they're trying to sell people as a moderate Democrat. They tried to sell Joe Biden as a moderate Democrat. They tried to sell VP Harris as a moderate Democrat. The people aren't buying. So the far left thinks, let's just be honest with the American people and run an actual progressive candidate, of which Joe Biden's not, or Kamala Harris is not, but you're trying to push a progressive agenda with it. It doesn't work because they don't know how to sell it. The Democratic Party had been getting away with this for a generation of getting the working class voters, the union vote, the mainstream vote, to vote for them, even though they were tricking them into voting for the progressive agenda. That day is dead. Either they need to start a third party like I told them to do 4 years ago, or just completely take over the Democratic apparatus and run as a left-wing party and not a Democrat party. Because there's a difference between left-wing politics and traditional Main Street Democrat politics. I'll get into that on a later day.
And that's something that I think your average observer right now, especially on the Republican side, would have a hard time understanding, because it's become such a name game over the last 25 years that Democrat equals left, Republican equals right. And in the last 10 years, if you're a Republican, you're a right-wing whack job. And if you're a Democrat, you must be a left-wing whack job, because only a whack job would be a Democrat and only a whack job would be a Republican.
Well, there's a vocabulary problem. We use the same words, but they mean different things. If I was to say I was left of center or right of center, I'm trying to say that I'm kind of a moderate person in American politics. Oh, I'm right of center. It means I'm probably socially liberal but fiscally conservative. I say I'm left of center, it probably means I believe in a little bit more big government and a little bit more anti-war, right? These are very basic things. I'm left of center, I'm right of center. But when I'm saying the left, as it equates to this conversation, I'm talking about the new left, the far left, socialist left, top-down government policy left, the inevitable constant social change left, the party of AOC, the party of Bernie Sanders. That's what I mean.
The left that, say, cuts their fire department budget so that they can have DEI training.
Yes, the left that says let's not have bail for major criminal offenses in large metropolitan areas And then let's watch crime and homelessness and drug abuse spike in 18 months to record levels and wonder why. That's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about these social engineered programs that were always on the fringes that have snuck in to the body politic of the entire Democrat Party and ruined it. Ruined one of the greatest political parties ever to exist anywhere in the world.
So, as Ronald Reagan said,
I didn't leave the Democratic Party left me.
So the Democrat Party that we've been dealing with for the last 20 years, the only Democrat Party that the younger generations have known, is not the Democrat Party who did all of these necessary programs in the mid-20th century. This is a Democrat Party that has pushed so far left that they've left the Democrat Party in the dust, and someone like Donald Trump, who by all traditional metrics should not be president, has been elected president twice in non-consecutive terms as a convicted felon. Because why? Because the Democrats are out in left field.
Because he sounds more like a Democrat, a John Kennedy Democrat or a Bill Clinton Democrat, than the Democrats do. Bill Clinton, I feel your pain. John Kennedy, ask not. And Trump's just like, we're going to win. Trump's campaign slogan really isn't Make America Great Again. I guess that's just the identity of the Republican Party, I suppose. But his slogan should be, we're just going to win. We're America, we're awesome. And blue-collar voters and hardworking people that are struggling want to hear stuff like that. Donald Trump is the new Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton won that election in 92 because he made people feel good about America. He made Democratic voters feel good about voting Democratic again. And Trump has made centrist, moderate voters feel good about voting for a Republican candidate again. This is not as complicated as people want to make it seem.
James, any final thoughts?
As I read the introduction to the show, and when you really put it all together the way you did on the destruction of the Democratic Party that gave American society some really good pieces of legislation and set a leadership tone in the middle of the century that had not yet existed in America, especially looking out for working people and minorities. It's sad to see that it's dead. It's not dying, it's dead.
You've been listening to Truth and Other Lies.